Hello, Brother Monroe here, back once again with some more World War II Battleship League, and I am here, as always, with our resident expert in all things naval warfare, Drachinifel.
Hello.
And today we have the challenge of the North Carolina class battleship, and we've had a little bit of a discussion about how to do this. And would you like to say why we've settled on the modern Battleship 2 with reduced beam and draft?
Yes, so it's basically because modern Battleship 1 is dimensionally pretty much a South Dakota hull.
Mm-hmm.
And the South Dakotas are famous for being relatively short and dumpy for reasons that we'll get to when we get into building that. If we built a North Carolina on that hull, it would look completely and utterly wrong.
Yeah.
But the sort of the whole layouts versus the displacements that are available in game at the moment for the US ships is completely off.
Yeah.
So Modern 2 is the of the ones that are available, it's the one that proportionally looks most like a North Carolina or later on an Iowa. But it's also by default colossally overweight. So we've tried to pare it back as far as humanly possible to the point where we've got something that's vaguely the right look and vaguely the right displacement.
Yeah, and players of Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts will be probably painfully aware that the United States has not had. I don't think they've had any kind of late game battleship polls for a long time. So it's a pretty limited selection compared to what the other nations get. So her actual displacement then, what was it? How close are we to getting it right?
The North Carolina, along with the South Dakota class, they're both treaty battleships. So ostensibly their displacement is 35,000 tons standard. But as we've been going with full load displacement thus far, their full load displacement is around about 45,000 tons. So we've kind of roughly managed to pull that off, but with these rather interesting shenanigans.
Yeah, just about. What about her top speed? How fast was she able to go?
Notionally, she could make 28 knots.
Okay.
Which, there's a whole backstory behind that. Basically, because she's built for the Panama Canal, the US fast battleships have this very odd profile, which you can actually see quite well on the right-hand side there before you scrolled up.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Where if you look from the top-down profile of most battleships, they have this kind of continuously curving hull, which is the best thing for hydrodynamics. The US battleships, they wanted the speed, but they also had beam issues getting through the Panama Canal. So you end up with this very nice, long, pointed bow, then a very slab-sided hull, which is to fit through the canal, and then it rounds off at the back. And part of the design issues with the North Carolinas was they put the two of the screws on what are called skegs, these basically long fins that run out from under the hull.
Come out like this, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it turned out that those created basically a little water tunnel down the middle, which would normally be not a massive issue, except for the fact that when the ships were running at full speed, it created a resonance tunnel. So the back end of the ship would start vibrating and jumping all over the place to the point that it could actually, if it ran for a long period of time, it could actually materially affect the structural properties of the ship. And more prosaically, it also had problems with, obviously, the fire control, and everything was vibrating, so you couldn't get accurate rangefinder bearings.
Yes.
Which is all a little bit inconvenient. They ended up spending quite a lot of time and money trying to solve the problem, but fundamentally you couldn't rip the skegs off.
No.
So after a long period of experimentation with propellers, shapes and sizes and numbers of blades, etc., they eventually settled on a formula which meant it ran relatively smoothly at its top speed, and it effectively moved the resonance problem down to about 17, 18 knots, which is not great, but on the other hand, cruising speed for these ships was below that and combat speed was above it. So you'd still get this vibration issue, but only if you're passing through that speed regimen, which wasn't too long.
Just put a note on the speed selector to not don't go in this range.
Don't dawdle in this range.
Yeah, flank is fine, half is fine. Just don't go to
Nothing else.
Full. No, none of that. Anyway, what about her bulkheads? Was she a heavily subdivided ship, or was
again, I go for like above average, but many is good.
All right, and we'll go with our standard regular crew. And I'm assuming she had standard quarters, or were they kind of designed as flagships with lots of extra room or anything like that?
The crew quarters were fairly standard. South Dakota, which obviously the next one along, but the name ship of that class was specifically designed as a flagship. But you see, the thing is, it's standard quarters for the U.S. Navy.
Yeah.
Compared to the Japanese ships, they were very luxurious quarters. But then, to be honest, anything short of solitary confinement is luxurious compared to the Japanese.
Okay, right. Tower selection. We have 3 to choose from, which I'm now seeing we're going to have beam issues, but we can come back to that. I'm just going to temporarily increase the beam so that we can actually fit them on. So we've got one like this with this sort of shaped barbette.
That's kind of your barbette. Yep.
And then we've got one with a kind of complete round barbette built into the tower, and then I think this one is similar but bigger.
All right, so that one is not strictly accurate. What's the middle one? Okay, we're going with a sort of much heavier mast arrangement, but yeah, whatever. That one's probably about the closest.
Okay.
Because when you see pictures of the North Carolinas, they do have this kind of, the superstructure does sort of fold into the barbette, the forward barbette, but the forward barbette is definitively its own cylindrical thing. So the first tower, unfortunately, is a non-starter at that point.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, I'm just going to reduce the beam back down again until the game moans at me. There we go. Just try and keep our displacement down a bit. And then secondary towers, we've got a few more choices. We've got a few of these types. There's 3 of them. I think they're just slightly bigger versions of each other that will actually just kind of fit right into the back like that.
Well, hers were the more triangular.
It doesn't give me many places to put it. I might increase the beam again just so that we can move things around. Then there's one like this with a couple of cranes on it. And then we have a Japanese one. I'm assuming that one's definitely not right.
No.
Another Japanese one. And then we have this one.
That's the closest to what we want.
Okay.
And kind of this, let's say it's the kind of this reverse triangle at the back.
It's going to be tricky with space, I can tell. And then, annoyingly, it doesn't seem like it wants to join up perfectly. And there's a bit of a yawning chasm, which shouldn't really be there. I'll see if I can...
Devs, please update.
Get rid of it. Sometimes you just need to move things around, and eventually it'll go together. But, yeah, they should be joined together. Okay. In that case, funnels. How many did you carry?
2.
2. Okay. We're pretty limited in choice. I think they're all the same sort of shape. Like that. And were they 2 the same size? Or was one bigger than the other?
Well, the one at the front is very fractionally larger. Well, it depends on the photo. Some of the photos it's considerably larger.
Something like that?
Let's have a look at side profile. Yeah, well, it's about as close as we're going to get, so yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the ones where we really don't have all the parts that we would maybe want. And then guns. What was she carrying?
Right. So we've got 3 triple 16-inch turrets.
One here, and one here, I'm assuming?
Yep.
Sort of like that?
Pretty much.
Okay, good, because it fits on the hull.
Just about, yeah.
I was going to see if I can get the beam down again. Just There we go. And what
Yeah.
about secondary guns?
So we have twin 5-inch,
Mm-hmm.
and in theory we should have 3 higher level mounts and 2 lower level mounts, which
Well,
actually we do
hey,
have.
look at that. Amazing.
And let's have a quick look. Near enough as makes no difference in the right locations as well, relative to the funnels and everything.
Wow. Well, small small victories, I suppose. Yeah, that's
Yes.
nice. Okay. And then presumably she had a ton of AA
40
guns or
mils,
something.
yeah.
40 mils.
Yeah, I mean, she started off life with the 1.1 inch and the 50 cal, as did most US battleships. But by the late war, she's got Orlikans and Bofors all over the place. So twin 40 mil equivalent.
Yeah, sure. What will that be in millimeters to inch? 1.6. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So minus 4. That's not what I meant. That's what I meant. Right. And yeah, just liberally spread
Liberally
around.
distribute wherever possible. Some gun tubs on the stern.
There's some here as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, US policy at this point, as I've pointed out in some of my videos, is basically, is there a gun present? If not, why is there not a gun present? So
Hey, yeah, can't.
there's some gun tubs up front as well.
There are. I seem to remember though that they get in the way of the main gun. Oh no, they don't.
Ah,
But yeah, you can shove them right on the front there as well.
there you go.
You can put them here as well, but
They'll interfere with the guns, yeah, so let's not do that.
With the guns.
Yeah, we got certain. I mean, we are more. To be honest, at this point, we are more closely resembling the South Dakota because we've had to increase the beam. But we're a North Carolina class that just needs a little bit of a diet at this point.
Okay, well, we can talk about the differences between this and the if we're ending up with a South Dakota-ish ship anyway.
Yeah.
we might could always combine them into a single entry.
Yeah.
So, what about propulsion setup?
So, highest quality oil.
Yeah.
The US is the center of oil production at this point. So, yeah, balanced boilers, geared turbines on the end, gear turbine 2. Auxiliary engines. They've definitely got diesels, power plant. So, yeah, let's go with diesel.
Okay.
Shaft 3. Shaft 3, I'd say. Balanced and balanced, yeah. And then they go for electrohydro 2, because we're in the advanced era, so we're going to be pretty standard. Crop 4 for the armor. Barbettes pretty decent, so let's go with 4. Anti-torpedo systems. I'm going to give them a 3. I mean, not that they're not really likely to come across any torpedo-based attackers in this, but yeah, the US torpedo defense was a little bit weird in that it was fairly conventional, but it wasn't the heaviest, and it did have some design flaws which they caught much later in fast battleship production. Yeah, double bottom, reinforced bulkheads 2, anti-flood 3. There was excellent damage control, and all or nothing citadel.
Fantastic. Right. On to the guns then. I'm assuming she carried an increased AP loadout.
I mean, it depends what time period, but we might as well go for increased AP because she is facing off against other battleships. Towards the end of the war, they started to massively ramp up the number of HE carried, but that's because they were looking at shore bombardment and stuff.
Not many targets for your AP shells when everything that you could shoot with them is at the bottom of the ocean. Presumably a base fused shell?
Yes.
Yeah. And we've been finding that we've kind of been needing to go for the cap list.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put those in for now. And then
now the interesting is these ships actually do have the super heavy shells.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll give them super heavy shells.
Yeah.
And presumably the Americans were using either cordite or triple base propellants?
I'd go with triple base.
Okay.
The Americans used a slightly different propellant mix to the Royal Navy, which, had its advantages, like not catastrophically detonating.
And we do have access to Dunite.
Which is explosive D, which is exactly what you would be. Well, for the most part, you'd be finding in their shells.
So we'll start off with that, and then obviously, as we have with the other ships, we'll adjust. What about her turret rotation mechanism?
Turret rotation is pretty good. It should be 4 degrees a second, but we're probably going to find interesting things happening.
Okay, it's 2.83 degrees per second.
So we want to upgrade that.
Let's just give it the best. Gives us 3.14, which is not too bad.
Yeah.
And then,
it's going to change.
Yeah, I'll start off with a semi-auto loader and see what that gives us. 0.99 rounds a minute.
Theoretically, they've got 2.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 round a minute isn't awful, but it probably should be a bit. It's representative of combat conditions unless they go rapid fire, but we probably need to increase that given what we're about to do to the rest of it.
Yeah, 1.17 with the Auto 2 loader, and then we'll come back to the gun and the length and stuff. Rangefinder, were they a coincidence or a stereotype?
Coincidence 4.
Oh, coincidence 4, sorry.
Yeah, reserving coincidence 5 for the absolute top line optical rangefinders. But the thing is, when it comes to that, US rangefinders weren't bad by any measure, but the people who ended up with coincidence 5s were basically late war battleships, or people like the Japanese were having to develop that last generation because they didn't have radar.
Yeah, makes sense.
Whereas the Americans' early adoption of radar, they don't necessarily have to worry quite so much.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'm assuming she had a hydrophone or something like that.
Again, it's torpedoes, no subs, so who cares?
Yeah.
Gen 3 radar by the end of the war. Obviously, she's starting off with Gen 1, but if we're looking at her late war configuration, then she should have Gen 3 and full radio suite and everything.
Right, let's have a look at the guns. So I know that they were what, 45 caliber by default.
Yes.
But as viewers of the series will know, we're going to try and account for the penetration and try and get the historical penetration rather than the historical length. So at the moment, what range would you like to look at in terms of...
Well, we've been using 20,000 meters.
We have, yeah.
So we'll go roughly with that because, helpfully the game measures it all in meters. There are figures in meters for a lot of guns, but of course the US guns, being working in imperial measurements, are all measured in yards. So we're going to have to slightly ballpark it because the available figures are for kind of 18,000 and change and almost 23. But we can roughly ballpark it.
Okay. So at 20,000 meters, currently the game is estimating 40 inches of base armor penetration, which would come out against the best of the best plate at about 16 inches of
which
pen.
It's slightly under, but not too much.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, looking at the 16... But for 20,000 meters, it's probably actually fairly accurate. You maybe like 16 and a half, but it's close enough.
Close enough that I think we could probably say that's good.
Yes. I think it's within like half an inch of what I'd expect the penetration to be at 20,000.
Yeah, that's fine then. Okay then. How about armor?
Right, now this is the interesting thing because all of the US fast battleships have inclined belts. And I don't think the game reflects that yet.
So if you play the campaign, it sort of does, because you get a tech that says, we now know how to incline our belt. And that is apparently factored into the armor quality figure if it's inclined. But I think... If they know what the equivalent was, if it was just slab-sided plate, that'll probably be the best value to put in to replicate the actual effectiveness of it.
Now you see that this is where we run into a little bit of a problem because, of course, if you have inclined armor, the effectiveness scales to your benefit the further away you are, and it reduces less and less to become basically negligible as you get closer in.
Yeah.
So if you're going to make it equivalent to at X range, then you have to determine, okay, well, what is X range? Because if you then take it below the X range, then it's going to become unrealistically durable. And if you take it above X range, obviously it'll become slightly weaker than it should otherwise be.
Given that we've been doing the penetrations at 20,000 meters, I think it would make sense to keep that as our kind of value that we're looking at. And that would be that's a fairly typical kind of engagement range between battleships. I think that's probably the fairest way to do it.
I mean, the other issue that you face at that point is, of course, everybody's shells are going to be coming in at different angles as well. But nonetheless, so let's try and work this out then. So, at 20,000 meters. Well, let's use its own shells. That's probably a good thing because, ships are supposed to be protected against their own shells. North Carolina herself actually wasn't. But that was because she was designed with quadruple 14s and very last minute upgraded to triple 15s. So at approximately 20,000 meters, you're looking at a 20-ish degree angle of fall. And then her armor was inclined at 15 degrees, so that's 35 degrees. So let's do, which then taken off from 90 is, what are we doing? 90, 60 is 55, I think. Yeah, that makes sense. So at that point, at 20,000 yards, in theory, it would be equivalent to 14.5 inches.
Okay.
If my calculator is doing that correctly.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, the thing is, you kind of, it's like which gun in particular do you use? Because if you're, say, Bismarck's the one, is it Bismarck that is the coming up into this?
Yeah, we can swap over to Bismarck actually because I've got her still loaded up.
Yeah, so because then at 20,000 yards for her, the angle of fall is 16, just over 16 degrees. So if you have 16, that's 31, and then 31 degrees is 59 equivalent, which would then make the relative thickness 14. So I'd say, for the sake of argument, I'd probably go for 14, just because with the super heavy shells that the Americans are using, their angle of fall is going to be slightly steeper than most. So that's probably slightly unrealistic, but yeah.
Okay.
So that's given her equivalent belt protection.
Yeah, because her actual thickness was what, 12 inches or something?
12, yes. Yeah.
Which would probably be a little bit unfair to her. So 14-inch sounds about right to me. And then presumably
she's all or nothing. So
4.5, but
just giving them 1.5.
Main deck.
Armor for the main deck is. Now this is fun because there's actually multiple armored decks.
Well, we can do that down here if you want.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So the uppermost deck is 1.5, basically 1.5 inches thick.
Right.
The next deck is 3.6 inches thick, but on top of some STS steel. So convincing it's homogeneous. So basically, second deck is 5.
Right. Hold on. So the game is really annoying. So I know what you're talking about. So this is an inch, and then down from that you've got a 3-inch plate or 3.6-inch plate, and then you've got another plate and so on. But the way the game will kind of demand that we do it is that this value is whatever is the thickest plate in the deck system is what it will consider the main deck.
Okay, so therefore we want to go with 5 inches on the main deck.
Okay.
And then 1.5 as the inner deck.
Okay.
That collates it basically, and then that's just bulkheads and plating, whatever.
Half an inch something.
Yeah. And of course there's no inner belt. There's just like 1.5 bulkheads.
Something like that.
Yeah, which is pretty much what we've been doing for most of the other stuff, except for the Italians.
Yeah, a couple of points of an inch on those. It's not going to make much difference.
And then the fore and aft decks are obviously somewhat less because it's all or nothing.
Just 1.5 again.
Yeah.
Superstructure armor.
Again, it's superstructure, so
a little bit, and then a conning tower if she even had one.
She does. 16-inch thick conning tower.
Okay. And turrets.
So 16-inch face, 9-inch sides. Oh, well, yeah. 9-inch at the sides.
And then top.
The roof is 7 inches thick.
And the barbette?
The barbettes are 16 inches at the side. So they're slightly thinner up front, but they only allows you one thickness. So
the 5-inch guns. I think it'll let us do that as well.
The 5-inch has basically 2-inch.
Fair enough. What was the caliber of the 5-inch gun? Out of interest.
It's actually a 5-inch 38 because it's a dual purpose.
38. Let's see if we can get that in. Might be able to. 38.
Yes,
there we go.
Exactly.
Perfect. Lovely. And then the Bofors were really long, weren't they?
40 mil 60s, 60 caliber.
Yeah, we're not going to get that, but we can get a 45.
Yeah, better than nothing.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Now
yeah.
Sorry.
No. I was interrupting.
Yeah. Now the interesting thing is we basically created something that's roughly speaking got the performance of a North Carolina with a slightly fudged belt. But the South Dakotas are basically the same in a lot of ways. They're the same guns. They're the same They're the same main guns. They're the same secondaries. The difference with the South Dakotas is they're slightly shorter single funnel vessels with slightly increased armor. I mean, the armor thickness itself is marginally, if at all, thicker, given that it's within tolerance of the manufacturers, but the angle is increased a bit more.
Okay.
So
we have a little bit of displacement left. Given that this kind of looks like a weird kludge between them anyway.
Yes.
Shall we combine them into a single entry?
Yes.
And
we call it the American treaty fudge.
Done. The treaty fudge. There you go.
Yes. So at which point, let me just run through the calculator.
Just going to see if we can fix that offset at all, because that is pretty high. No, it's pretty much the only place that'll let me put those towers.
So the belt armor at that point should go up to 14.9 if we're taking its equivalent value at 20,000 meters against a Bismarck shell.
Okay. Sounds good. And then that's pretty much all the same. So
the turrets are a fraction thicker, but everything else is pretty much the same. The turrets are 18 inches instead of 16, but we're creating the fudge, so let's see if we've got the displacement for it.
Just about. Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So we've basically at this point created a kind of South Dakota, vaguely profile masquerading as a North Carolina, with an indeterminate beam. because the game gives us very, very little to go on,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Well, I still think it definitely looks like an American
Hmm.
fast battleship
Of some description.
of some class or other or
Yeah.
other. Um, no, I think she looks good. We'll see what she looks like underway. Um, no, I think she looks. You know, if you'd had a lot of rum the night before or
Hmm.
something, um, you'd go, is that a North Carolina or is it a South Dakota? I'm not sure. Before realizing that it was
Yeah.
neither.
The answer, of course, is just a generic yes.
Yes, yes, it is.
It is. It is a ship.
Yes, it is a ship. Definitely, definitely an American ship,
Yes.
um, as well. So it's pretty much all we're going to get. Well,
Hmm.
thank you very much for joining me for this sort of slight bodge, but we are very much limited by what we have available in game, and those two classes are very very similar to each other in terms of performance. So I think it's fair enough to kind of condense it down to a single entry. But thank you very much. And next time we'll be looking at the last ship build, which will be Iowa.
Yes.
So make sure you come back for that, those of you watching, and we'll see you again soon for some more Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts. Bye for now.
Bye.